Hey mamas, I am so excited for you to meet Marieta, who is a first-time mama like many of you, and she experienced an unmedicated induced hospital birth. Marieta shares her experience and advice on switching care providers when you don't feel completely confident in the care that you're receiving from your current provider, and how to know your options and make decisions that best suit your birth goals. If you love Marieta's story, make sure you subscribe to the Built to Birth podcast, rate it, and then write a review so that your podcast platform knows to share these inspiring birth stories to mamas just like you. Marieta shares about her last-minute preparation before her birth experience and how much research and education plays a part in the birthing experience. If you want to have an informed pregnancy and birth, I have an online childbirth education course, so if you're looking to build up your mind, body, and team for a happier, healthier, and easier birth, go to my website, builttobirth.com, which is linked down below in the descriptions. So without further ado, here is Marieta's birth story.
I had my daughter almost 5 weeks ago. So I'm a researcher. I work at a university doing academic research on various anomalous experiences like near-death experiences and little kids talking about past life memories. And I'm very passionate about this, and I would say it's my dream job. And I moved here in Central Virginia for this job 2.5 years ago. And then I subsequently met my husband here. We got married and we just had a baby, and everything happened relatively quickly, which is what I was hoping for. So this is the gist of it. I'm going to try to keep it short.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear your birth story, and it's awesome that that's a really interesting line of work that you're in. That's not, an everyday job that we hear about. So that's really cool, and I'm sure that gives you an interesting perspective on life as well, you know?
It's definitely a very unusual occupation, and there's pretty much only one place in the entire country that is dedicated to this kind of work at the University of Virginia. So I feel very grateful to be doing this.
Wow.
And it's really a dream come true for me.
Good. That's amazing. I love it. So you and your husband met and then you got married, and then how soon did you guys become pregnant after being married?
Technically about 4 months after getting married. I knew I wanted to have kids soon, and neither of us is very young. So we knew that if we wanted this to happen, we'd kind of have to get started on it pretty soon. And thankfully it worked out, and we didn't have any issues. So I'm also very grateful for that.
Yeah.
And I was prepared for it to take a while. I knew that it could happen relatively quickly, or it could take a while, even if there are no problems whatsoever. So,
getting pregnant is unpredictable. Pregnancies and births are unpredictable. And so, there's variables no matter your age or circumstance or, anything in life. It's just a little bit unknown.
Yes. But thankfully it worked out.
Awesome. So you guys were able to conceive naturally then?
Yeah.
Awesome. That's amazing. Good. So what was your reaction when you got pregnant? Were you expecting to get pregnant when you did, or was it a little bit of a shock, or what were your emotions behind that?
I wouldn't say I was expecting it to happen, because I knew we can't predict that. I was certainly hoping that it would happen. But leading up to when I found out, I think I was expecting it to not happen, because I had started getting some light menstrual period symptoms. So the day before, I pretty much decided, okay, it's not happening this month, because I started experiencing the same symptoms, but I ended up not getting my period. So the next day, literally one day after missed period, I decided to just do a test, because I was quite impatient, and part of me was still hoping that, okay, maybe I am pregnant. And it actually turned out that I was. Yeah.
I love it. That's amazing.
I basically picked up a couple of very cheap dollar store tests on my way to work.
Yeah. Because if
And
you're not pregnant, you don't want to like waste that money on those expensive pregnancy tests.
right.
You know?
And I'd also heard that they actually do work.
Yeah, they do. They totally do.
It was literally like, I think I got 3 for $1.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then I did the test as soon as I got to work.
Mm-hmm.
And as it happened, literally a couple of hours later, I was supposed to go to my primary care physician for my annual exam. So now basically like a physical checkup. So I thought, oh, this is great. So I could go in and actually get a blood test. Mm-hmm. So I literally got the blood test confirmation the same day.
Wow.
Like maybe 5 hours later.
That's great.
And then it was very exciting, but it still was I was certainly very happy, but it was still a bit of a shock, if that makes sense. Like, oh, I can't believe it's happening.
Yeah. So you found out at the beginning of your work day. When did you tell your husband that you were pregnant?
Literally as soon as I got in the car to drive to the doctor's office.
And what was his reaction?
I honestly think that I took the test like maybe like 20 to 30 minutes before having to leave for the doctor's office. And I was thinking, oh, should I surprise him? I wasn't going to tell him right away. But then once I got in the car and I was going and hopefully having it confirmed, I couldn't wait. So I just called him. And it was very non-romantic and kind of very like, oh, wait. Do you have a moment? And I have news. And he was like, wow, I can't believe it. He was excited, but both of us were like, oh, wow. So it is real and it is happening. And both of us were very excited, but it wasn't anything like exuberant or overly romantic or special, but it was still a very special moment.
Yeah, of course. I feel like that's a special moment no matter how it's shared or experienced. Yes. I feel like for most moms, like, I mean, we do see these like glamorous, like not proposals, but like, you know, like surprise, you're going to be a dad, you know, things like that. We see all these like fun ideas to like reveal that. But I feel like most of us are just like you, just like too excited to hold it in any longer. Just like, I just have to blurt it out.
That's exactly what it was. I just didn't want to withhold that information from him.
Yeah.
Not even for like a day or half a day.
Yeah. Because it's like, it's all consuming. Like everything you do, it's like, I'm doing this, but I'm also pregnant. So it's so hard not to share that with the person you love, you know?
Yeah. And what I also did, so after coming back from the doctor's office, obviously it wasn't that the results were going to take some time to come out. And the doctor said, oh, hopefully by the end of the day. So when I got back, I actually went to the pharmacy and bought a few more tests, more expensive this time, and and started doing more testing. And sure enough, it came back positive. And after the second additional test, I actually heard back from the doctor. So that was a lot of testing in one day.
Yeah. And I feel like that's so many moms. It's like we have to have all of these tests to actually confirm like, okay, this is really happening.
Yeah, my husband absolutely didn't get it. And he was like, why are you wasting all that money? Like it's not gonna get any less positive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, but I just have to make sure one more test.
Yeah. And I just said, you know what, you're not gonna get it. Just let me do my thing.
Yeah. Yep. That's so true. Well, I love it. So you found out you were pregnant and then kind of walk me through your pregnancy a little bit in terms of like how you prepared for your birth, what you were kind of looking for in your birth experience, you know, support from your care providers, things like that.
So thankfully my pregnancy was pretty uneventful. I didn't have any complications. Nothing that during the pregnancy that could have gone wrong went wrong. So it was, there were the various normal discomforts that were better or worse at different times, but it was pretty much, a pretty good, uneventful pregnancy. And I knew, like, best case scenario, I knew I wanted something as close to natural as possible with as little intervention as possible. And I'd spent a lot of time thinking about that in, prior years and decades. I'm originally
And what was the reasoning behind wanting that kind of more intervention-free birth?
I just believe that for most of human history, women have been able to deliver babies normally without any intervention. Now, of course, maternal mortality used to be much higher and fetal mortality used to be much higher before modern medical care. So there's definitely a place for various interventions. But I also knew if nothing's going wrong, most people can deliver normally and kind of avoid a lot of these extra interventions that tend to happen at a hospital. And I had a lot of knowledge about birth and pregnancy because my dad and my grandfather were OBGYNs. So I kind of grew up hearing a lot about deliveries and pregnancies and also hearing a lot of things that could go wrong.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, maybe that kind of affected my thinking, but I knew, I knew that it's possible to go to try to do something that's closer to what nature intended, while at the same time being open to the possibility that things might go wrong. And when I was younger, I used to think that, okay, maybe I'll want home birth. But right now, I think one reason that I didn't even consider that this time is that I knew, okay, that wouldn't be covered by insurance. And I also didn't necessarily think my husband would be on board with anything like that. However, I did end up in midwife care and delivering with the midwife at a hospital. Initially, I joined a practice and started seeing the OBGYNs, but then maybe around week 28 of pregnancy, which was kind of late in the game, but they still let me do it. I actually switched over to the midwives, and I'm so very grateful that I did that. And the reason for that was, first of all, I realized midwives have a lot more time during appointments to work with you and talk with you and answer any concerns that you may have. And also, I also knew from research that with a midwife, you're a lot more likely to get support during the delivery with birthing positions and a lot more active help that's specifically geared towards helping you speed up the process naturally. As far as preparing for birth, I mean, I have to say I wasn't doing as much as I could have been doing, like as far as, okay, how do I actively prepare for birth? Maybe about a month and a half before my due date, I started freaking out and thinking, oh, wow, this is coming. It's going to be very exciting, but this baby has to come out. And that's when I started looking up videos on YouTube, and that's how I found your channel. That was extremely helpful. Thank you.
Of course.
So I started, watching a lot of videos and practicing certain breaths. And my husband and I took some prenatal classes where, we learned a lot about what to expect. And that was specific to that hospital. But like I said, I also knew from when I was younger a lot about birthing and delivery and just had a heightened interest in the topic and access to more information. But yeah, as far as preparing for my own delivery, I could have done more and I kind of left it to the last minute, but thankfully it worked out and I still had a good experience.
Good. That's amazing. So for a mama who is, not sure or maybe struggling with a care provider, that she has now, what would you recommend being someone who switched care providers, not necessarily because, you were, hitting heads or anything, but you did switch your care provider later on in the game, and I think that can be a little bit scary for moms, and they feel like they can't do it. What's your advice for a mama who maybe is thinking about changing her care provider?
I think I would say don't do it out of fear. So don't do it because you're running away from something. Do it rather because you like something else. So in my case, I had missed one appointment with my OBGYN because I think it was pregnancy brain. I thought it was the next day, and it turned out to be the day before. And so the only way for them to see me that same day was to actually schedule me with a midwife. So I went to one midwife appointment, and this particular lady was amazing. And I thought, wow, I just had a really good experience. I felt really good about it. And I thought, well, maybe I should consider that. It just felt right. And I have to say, this particular midwife, just like with everything else, there's variability. Some people are better than others. She turned out to be one of the best ones, but I think it worked out for me that in this one instance, it just felt right and opened that window for me to consider that possibility. So I would say just go with what feels right, but also be informed. And I knew that, again, for a low risk pregnancy, and midwives only handle low risk pregnancies anyway. For low risk pregnancies, the outcomes at a hospital are pretty good.
Yeah, they are. And I love what you said about not making a decision out of fear because you're running away from something. And I think that's so powerful in, choosing your care provider, but also with anything in life, and especially birth. Don't make decisions out of fear or a place of disempowerment. Like, never say, oh, I can't do this, and so I'm not going to. It's like, no, I would prefer something else, so I'm choosing not, like, even when it comes to medicated or unmedicated, it's not that you can't have an unmedicated labor. It's that maybe you would prefer a medicated labor where you can be more relaxed, things like that. And it's making a decision out of empowerment and not out of fear. And I love that you said that.
Yep. And I would also say, just know yourself and what is important to you. And for me, one of the things that are very important to me is to be able to discuss my care and feel like I can ask all the questions. I'm a very inquisitive person, very analytical. I like to think a lot about the different ramifications of any decision. And I'd gotten to the point where I felt like with the OBGYNs, there was a certain level past which I couldn't ask any more questions. And there was this feeling, well, it wasn't just a feeling, like they would tell me, one of them in particular, it's like, well, we're the experts, and you just, at some point, you just got to trust we know what you're doing. And she's right. You have to trust your provider, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that's a possibly a red flag for any mama who just feels like they're not getting that clear communication with their care provider to say, like, okay, I need to feel safe in this process and comfortable and trusted and respected. And so if those aren't the feelings that you're getting between you and your care provider, then it might mean that you need to find a new one in order to have those feelings. And I will say, though, that once I switched to the midwives, there was a midwife practice in the same OBGYN practice. And just like the OBGYNs, they were on rotation. So at delivery, you didn't know who you were going to get. And there were 5 midwives. And there was one of them that I was not very fond of for those same reasons. Thankfully, I didn't get her at the delivery. But my point is that even with midwives, you can... you can run into that, and
of course,
thankfully, if you have a choice, it's good to avoid. Basically, just go with someone that you're comfortable with. And you feel like they'll support you in whatever you want, and they'll answer all your questions.
Yeah, I think that's great. So I love that you were able to choose your midwife that you felt comfortable and confident with. So then, was she there at your birth, or did you have another midwife at your birth?
No, I actually said that I couldn't choose. I could choose
you
the
could choose the practice, but then they were, for the appointments, you chose your midwife.
But at the delivery, like they had
it was
their
whoever it was
schedule.
On call.
Exactly.
And so you didn't get the one that you didn't like.
I didn't get the one that I didn't like. I got one that I was yet to meet, but she turned out to be fantastic, so it worked out.
Good.
But on my way to the hospital, my husband and I were discussing, like, as long as we don't get the one that you don't like, we're going to be fine.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. So why don't you walk us through your birth experience then?
Okay, so where do I begin? So I guess at week 38 plus 1 day, so we're 2 weeks out from the due date. I was still working and trying to finish a project for work, but at the same time I was freaking out about the delivery. Also, one of my biggest worries was that my husband would not be able to be with me at the delivery because of the coronavirus restrictions. So that was something that towards the end was honestly a bigger source of stress for me than even how the birth was going to go. Like it was a big source of stress, and I would check every day, are they still allowing one support person? Thankfully he was able to be there with me, but towards the end it was, I was just saying, I'm not ready. Hopefully she'll wait until the due date, which obviously you can't control these things. And he was saying, I think she'll be here early. But emotionally, even the day before, I was saying, I'm just not ready. I have all these things to finish. And obviously I was still excited to meet the baby, but I think psychologically part of me was still, there were all these added stressors.
Yeah.
So the night before we had her, we had a virtual game night with friends, and that was Saturday night. And we were saying maybe we'll continue on Monday. And I was saying, well, for all I know, we might have the baby on Monday. So I don't know. So that's kind of how we ended it. And then after that, my husband and I were going to sleep, and I felt this, like, some fluid leakage a little bit. And that had been happening over the previous couple of weeks. And it had happened a couple of weeks before that. And I had to go in and get checked to see if it's amniotic fluid or urine. Cause at this point, with all the pressure the baby was putting on my bladder, it was really hard to tell. But a couple of weeks before that, it turned out it was just urine, nothing, nothing had leaked yet. So I went to bed that night with that experience. Well, I don't know what it is. And then throughout the night, like, I would literally wake up maybe every half an hour and feeling like I'm peeing myself. And at this point, it got me worried, because I'm thinking, I've not drank that much water. Why am I still peeing myself?
Yeah.
And at this point, I started suspecting that this might be amniotic fluid. And I called labor and delivery and talked to the midwife on call and basically described what was happening. And she basically said, yeah, from what you're describing, it really sounds like your amniotic fluid is leaking. And that freaked me out, because I knew that once the process starts, if you're not showing any signs of labor, they're going to want to induce within a certain amount of time. And that was definitely one of the things that I was hoping for. That was part of my birth plan, was to avoid any kind of induction unless it was medically necessary. And obviously in this case, it would have been medically necessary. But I was still bummed out about it, because that's not how I was hoping that my labor would start, or that the experience would go. And we were even prepared to labor at home for as long as possible and then go to the hospital. But once I talked to the midwife in the middle of the night, she pretty much said, I'm very confident that this is your amniotic fluid leaking. And what I would recommend is that you go to the hospital early in the morning or before that, like give it a couple of hours to see if labor starts, but definitely in the morning, go to the hospital. And if it turns out that it's amniotic fluid, then we're basically not going to let you go and we're going to induce labor, etc. So needless to say, I couldn't really go back to sleep after that.
Yeah, of course.
I didn't wake my husband up because I thought, well, there's no point in either of us sleeping. So I'm just going to give him a couple more hours to sleep. So.
And were you feeling anything at this point other than like the leaking amniotic fluid?
Nope. Okay. I wasn't feeling anything. It was just, well, I was feeling stress, I guess, but no real signs of labor.
Or labor. Yeah, no labor symptoms.
Nothing. And then in the meantime, I was texting with my dad. Like I said, he's an OBGYN. I'm originally from Bulgaria. My dad is there. And I texted him in the middle of the night, and it was during the day for him. And I said, yeah, this is what's happening. He was also like, yeah, it definitely sounds like this is your amniotic fluid leaking. You need to go to the hospital as soon as possible. So I was texting with him a little bit throughout the night. And then in the morning around 6 o'clock, I woke up my husband and I said, okay, I think I basically told him what had transpired. And I said, we need to go. And it sounds like we may have to stay and have the baby. And at this point, I think I was a little bit, I was still kind of in disbelief. Like I was in disbelief that that's where things were going. So eventually we made our way to the hospital around 8 a.m. and there was screening at the door for symptoms for COVID-19. So long story short, we went to triage. A different midwife had come for the new shift, and it was one that I hadn't met, but she seemed very nice. And they did a bunch of tests, and it was indeed determined that I had been leaking amniotic fluid. No doubt about it. And at this point, she ran the story again about, well, we have to induce you because of the risk of infection. At this point, still no labor symptoms of any kind. And at this point, I'm kind of freaking out and thinking, okay, I had this birth plan in my head, even though I knew that it's just it's just preferences. We don't have any control over the process. But I was starting to feel bummed out about
just being derailed from what you were expecting to happen.
Yeah, at the very beginning. And thankfully she was very understanding, and she tried to calm me down, and basically she said, well, we're going to start with, before the Pitocin, we're going to start with I think the drug is called Cytotec. I'm not sure. Basically cervical ripening medication to kind of get things started before the Pitocin.
So it releases prostaglandins to help soften the cervix and, like you said, kickstart labor, hopefully start those contractions.
And she said, she basically gave me hope, because she said, it's rare, but in some women that's sufficient to kickstart labor. And I think I kind of held on to this hope. Later on, I looked up statistics that it's actually kind of rare. and in the vast majority of cases, it just ends up being the first step towards the Pitocin induction. So after that, I think it took a while with all the checks and the different things that were happening to actually get us to the labor room and get us situated. And at that point, I still didn't have any labor symptoms whatsoever. And they said we're going to do 3 doses of that drug, 3 to 4 hours apart. And I think by 11 in the morning, they had started me on the first dose and they were monitoring contractions. Nothing really happened as far as things that I could feel. And then 4 hours later, they gave me the second dose. Still nothing in the beginning. And I think finally, around an hour and a half after the second dose, I started feeling light cramps. Which actually gave me hope.
Yeah, it's almost like, oh, good. Like, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable. This is a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. It was, I thought, okay, maybe this is working. And then they could tell from monitoring the contractions that something was happening. So we were kind of on the way to possibly having it work. But again, we were still far away from a full-blown labor process. But I think that was 4:30 in the afternoon when I started feeling these first signs of labor, like menstrual cramps. And after that, I was trying to move a lot. I actually did a meditation. It was this audio chakra meditation that was basically going through different parts of your body and kind of encouraging you to open up. And I have no evidence to support this, but I definitely feel that that's something that kind of helped me in that process. Not just to calm down, but I really, on some level, I think it helped actually speed up or start the process.
I 100% believe that.
So after that, and at this point, the timeline is kind of blurry, but basically over time, these menstrual cramps started getting a little bit stronger, and it was still manageable. And I was going to the bathroom a lot. And at one point I noticed that this pink, whatever you want to call it.
Egg whitey.
Yeah. And I think that was what they call the bloody show. So at this point, I'm like, okay, this is exciting. And we called in the midwife into the room as soon as possible. And I said, I think something's happening. And as soon as I described it, she got very excited. And she said, yeah, I think things are working. And she was wonderful because she was definitely very dedicated to helping me get the experience that I was hoping for while still trying to keep things safe. So she was definitely as excited as I was.
That's amazing.
So from that point on, it was just, things getting a little bit more intense. She said, I think things have started. Maybe we'll give you the 3rd dose of the drug. We'll see how things are going. But in the end, we ended up not even doing the third dose. Things just progressed on their own.
Kind of took over.
Yeah. And at this point, as far as pain relief, there wasn't anything. I should say that going into the experience, I had decided that my preference was to go without an epidural, and it wasn't for any masochistic reason, I want to experience pain or I want to prove myself or nothing like that. It was basically I am not very comfortable with some of the cons of having an epidural. I'd read some research that on average it could prolong labor, and if things get stuck, end up in more with more interventions. And I also wasn't too keen on the idea of having a needle in my back. So my plan was, that's what I'm gonna go for, but if it doesn't work and if I'm too desperate, I'm gonna go for it. So it was kind of I was flexible and open about it, but really trying to see how far I could go without any kind of, certainly without an epidural. I was open to getting intravenous drugs, but that didn't happen either. And I had definitely decided to get nitrous oxide, but again, because of the virus situation, that was not an option because their filters for the gas mask were somehow not virus proof.
Yeah.
So anyway, at this point, there's no pain, like medical.
You weren't receiving any pain medication.
Yeah, no. We did get one thing that I insisted on from the beginning was getting the one labor unit with a tub in it. And I definitely knew I wanted to use the tub. So I think by 7:30 in the evening, I was already in some serious pain. That's when the new shift of night nurses came in. And at this point, it's all kind of a blur. Like, there's these people. And it's really, I do remember the timeline, but it's a lot of it is kind of a blur. And then
Definitely.
by the point
I feel like that is it with labor.
By the time things got pretty intense, they decided to transfer me to the tub. And by this point, I was in serious pain. I mean, things over a couple of hours, it went from menstrual cramps, light menstrual cramps, to serious menstrual cramps, to, oh my God, this hurts. So in the tub, the nurses, my husband, they were all extremely supportive, and there were things that they did that definitely helped with the pain.
What kind of things did they do?
Like counter pressure massage on my lower back, and also pouring warm water over my belly. I also listened to kind of meditative music, but really at this point, the whole tub experience is just a blur of me just constantly at every contraction. I was just praying, God, please help me. God, please help me. Like literally this is literally what I was saying at every contraction. That's all I remember. And also
and
thinking,
that was your ritual. That's like what you did every time. That was what got you through each surge. Yeah, exactly. That was your mantra.
That was literally my mantra. And I was imploring, I was praying and asking for all the help, because I really didn't think I could make it. And at that point I was, over time I also started saying, I don't think I could do this. Why did I get myself into this? Like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking even getting pregnant? I think, a lot of that looking back sounds ridiculous, but I'm sure.
But in the moment, those were real like questions you were asking yourself. I'm sure, like, really, why did I get myself into this?
And I think maybe somehow it might have helped, because it was. I don't know, I was kind of processing things at the moment, like, oh my God, I cannot believe this is so painful. And what was I thinking? I actually started feeling bad for my husband, because I could somehow, in that state that I was in, I could still tell that it was also a difficult experience for him, because he was, at this point, he had been supporting me for hours and like literally like physically hands-on. And by this point, I didn't know how dilated I was, because we had decided, well, the midwife never said, okay, let's check you when you come in and measure your dilation. She basically said, there's certain risks associated with it. Like,
especially after your water has been broken, they want to really limit the amount of times that they're doing those exams to limit the risk for infection.
Right, exactly. So at this point, I had no idea how far along I was. I just knew, oh my God, this is excruciating pain. And what am I doing here? I even started saying, yeah, I want to go home.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually things in the tub were not working as well as they were. So they suggested, let's go to the shower. And the shower thing did not work out at all. I think the water, I tend to like really warm or hot water. And the water there, I don't know if it was the water not being warm enough, or I think it was just, I basically started shivering.
Yeah. And that's hormones too. That's what's going to happen towards the end of labor.
Yeah, that part was pretty painful too. I mean, even just getting myself to the bathroom. So after that, I think we decided to actually go to the bed. And I think they gave me a peanut ball. At this point, I'm kind of out of it and just in excruciating pain. And in addition to praying to God at every contraction, I also started saying, I don't think I can do this. I think I might want the epidural.
Yeah.
I'm starting to consider the epidural. So I think after 5 contractions of me saying that, the midwife said, well, okay, let's see how far along you are. And if you're 3 centimeters dilated after all this pain you've been in, maybe you should get the epidural. But if you're kind of close to the end, then maybe you should not get it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. So then she checked my cervix and she had the biggest grin, and she turned to the nurse and she's like, oh, she's ready.
That's amazing. Oh, wow.
And I think they were all in disbelief.
Yeah.
But I literally, I thought they were joking or something. And I kept asking, are you sure? Is this for real?
Yeah.
And
I feel like all the symptoms that you're not symptoms, but all the things that you're sharing right now, you know, of the shivering and saying like, I can't do it. I want to escape. Like, I want the epidural. All of those things in my mind, I'm like, oh, I bet you she's close to the end. I bet you she just went through transition and she's almost ready to have the baby. So I was like just anticipating you sharing like what, you know, you measured at. And so that's amazing that you know, even in your disbelief that you really were 10 centimeters dilated and ready to go. That must have been such a huge relief.
Yeah. And honestly, when she said that, my first thought was not, wow, I'm going to meet my daughter. They were saying, you're going to have a baby. You're going to have, at this point, it was like after 9:30 in the evening. Yeah. And I was thinking initially that we're going to have the baby the next day. But she said, no, you're having the baby tonight. It's going to be today. Yeah. And you're going to meet your baby. And my first thought was after I realized that they were actually not kidding me and they were serious, my first thought was, okay, I need this to end. It was not like, oh my God, I'm going to meet like that was obviously I was excited about that. But in this moment, like my visceral reaction was, oh my God, I need this to be over. And she also said oh, no wonder you were in so much pain.
Yeah, because it was towards the end.
Yeah. So literally after she said I was ready to push, we kind of immediately went from trying to get through the contractions to actually trying to push. And we tried one position at first that didn't work out. And then we tried
What position was that?
It was facing the back of the bed.
Of the bed, kind of like on an all fours position.
Not all fours, but like leaning,
where you were propped up on.
Yeah, leaning so against kind of like the back of the bed, and kind of with my knees meeting in the middle and my legs kind at the bottom out to the side, if that makes sense.
Okay.
We tried we tried that for a couple of contractions, but somehow I couldn't make it work. And then we tried the I guess the more traditional position of being like facing out and someone kind of pushing on my legs.
Your legs, yeah.
Which my husband did a lot of that. He basically did the work of one of the nurses.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so after that, I think I got hopeful that this was going to be over. And somehow initially the pushing didn't hurt as much as the other contractions.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's kind of manageable. So I think in the end, I wasn't looking at the clock very closely, but I think it was something like close to 45 minutes that I was pushing.
That's amazing.
They said it was pretty productive, and they gave me some very good suggestions for how to breathe and push. And at the very end, I had read about the ring of fire, but I didn't quite know what it was. I just knew it was a concept. But towards the end, when I started experiencing that, I knew, okay, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
And I started
kind of describe that sensation that you experienced.
Like literally burning.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's interesting because some women experience it and other women don't. So I'm sure there are mamas who are listening who are like, oh, maybe I'm going to experience that, but then, maybe not. I never experienced that, like looking back. And so, but I talked to so many moms who have.
Yeah, it was just a very strong burning sensation. And at this point, like, I was screaming. So long story short, eventually towards the end, they said the baby's ready to come out. And I distinctly remember they said, yeah, we think the baby's going to be out with the next push. And actually with every contraction, I think I did like I could get in like 2 or 3 pushes with 2 or 3 separate breaths. And in the end, they said, yeah, we think the baby's coming. And I remember they rang this bell to call the baby nurses. And that's when I thought, okay, maybe they're not kidding me. Like, and
I love it.
Actually, one of the nurses did say, see, I'm calling the nurses. Like, this is.
So this whole time you were in almost denial that you were going to have her soon, or like not sure if they were being truthful.
It's hard to be in denial at the end because you definitely feel the baby. Like once the baby is down there, you cannot be in denial about it. But maybe I was in denial that maybe I thought that it wasn't, oh, it's going to take forever and they're just saying.
Yeah, because things did happen so quickly. So it's kind of your mind catching up with your body.
Yeah. So in the end, my daughter was born, and then they did the whole, put her on my chest. And this hospital is very good about doing bonding for an hour or 2. So we got that. We got that time. I was in disbelief. I mean, I was very relieved that it was over, and I wouldn't say that things weren't hurting afterwards, but it didn't matter because, okay, at least this part was over. And so from the time that I started feeling any labor pains, even the light ones like menstrual cramps, to the time that I had the baby, it was about 6 hours.
Wow, so very quick labor.
Yeah, they were saying like, wow, this is amazing. You're a rock star. I'm like, what? And in the end, I think I was pretty happy with not having to go down the epidural route. But I also thought, oh my God, I totally get why people have an epidural, because it hurts so much. It's obviously manageable because people do it, but in the moment it can
it's a challenge.
Can be, very intense and very painful. Overall, I'm extremely grateful that the nurses I got and the midwife I got were very, very wonderful and supportive, and they had really wonderful suggestions. They were they're very focused on giving me the experience that I wanted as much as possible. And I'm also extremely grateful that my husband was there and that he was able to support me throughout the whole experience and also share this very, very special moment.
Yeah, that's so special. I love it. Thank you for sharing that story with us. That is so, I think, empowering for moms who are experiencing a hospital birth for the first time, especially during this coronavirus crisis, just
Yeah.
to kind of hear an experience of a fellow first-time mom going through it for the first time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm very glad I could share this. And when I was pregnant, I love reading other women's birth stories, and they're all so different. But in the end, if you can end up with something that kind of resembles what you were hoping for, or even if it wasn't what you were hoping for, but you were at peace about it, then that's really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. For mamas who are listening to this and maybe going into, an induction that they weren't expecting, or maybe that they were expecting but not totally thrilled about, what would you kind of encourage them with, or some advice for them?
Well, I would say, that probably applies to non-induction situations too, but try to do as much as you can to help the process by walking and trying different positions and using gravity. I think I did mention the part that I also did some birthing on a ball and other things, but I think that helped as well.
Yeah.
So whatever, even, and it's not a binary thing, like you don't get any medication or you get all the medication, like it's a range. So even if you have to have some interventions or some medications, still try to do whatever you can to naturally help the process. And then you might still end up in a situation where you don't need that much Pitocin.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think too, just knowing the different processes, because a lot of times moms don't realize that there's more than one way to be induced, and to really go into your experience knowing what are all my options, what can I say no to, what can I wait for, what can I what are my options, what are XYZ that I can do, and I think that played a big part in your birth experience too, communicating with your care providers that you wanted to avoid Pitocin as much as possible, and them allowing you to just use that cytotec to, help that labor progress.
Yeah. And it's important to have a provider that you could talk to about these things. That's huge.
Yeah.
Just have someone that you trust, and someone who's open to explaining and discussing the options with you, which every provider should be that way, but unfortunately it's not the case.
Yeah. And I think what we were talking about in the beginning, kind of to wrap this all up, going back to what we were saying with choosing a care provider that really sets the tone for your experience, because the person who you trust and are confident in is going to, enhance your birth experience, whereas someone who you aren't able to trust and who you don't feel respected by can possibly take away from that experience.
Yeah, and you certainly don't want that kind of stress when you get to that point.
Yeah.
And another piece of advice, if you have a good experience, make sure you take a picture with your doctor or your midwife or whatever.
Yeah, that's great.
Just to commemorate that moment.
Yeah, that's great. I love that piece of advice. And I know that so many moms, all the moms who are listening to this, are going to find encouragement from your story. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me. It was amazing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Yes, of course. Well, enjoy this newborn phase with your baby. I know that with the coronavirus, you're probably tucked away inside, but there's no better time to be, taking a step back, letting time slow down, and enjoy your baby, so that, you really set that good foundation with them. So I hope that you're enjoying that.
Great. Thank you so much, Bridget. And thanks for everything you do on your channel.
Oh, of course. Thanks for sharing your story with us, Marieta, and I'll hopefully talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Well, Mama, if you are facing an induction or hospital birth or any birth where things haven't gone according to plan, I hope you are feeling encouraged by Marieta's story. I know every birth experience is different, and it's not about what outcome you have with your birth as much as how much you felt in control of your birth, respected through your birth, and in authority over your birth experience. If you are not feeling that way with your current care provider, I encourage you to, like Marieta, find someone you connect with and trust that has your best interest in mind. And if you're needing some encouragement and empowerment spoken over you right now, you can purchase and download the Built to Birth affirmations through my website so that you have powerful words guiding your mind and body. Because remember, where your mind leads, your body follows. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and then write a review of the Built to Birth podcast. And thanks for being with me in this podcast, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, mamas.